Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll discuss the interpretation of Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi vis-a-vis Surah Fil. Now, the general interpretation which we are very aware of is that during the birth year of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abraha, the ruler of Yemen, had actually attacked the Holy Kaaba with a 60,000 strong army, which also boasted elephants and, of course, some horses. And his intention was to destroy the Holy Kaaba. And it is said that Abdul Muttalib actually went into the nearby mountains of Mecca, and he hid there, and he actually consigned the holy shrine to the Almighty and said that it is you who are the Lord of this house, and it is you who is going to protect it from Abraha. And this is how we have been told, and we have been reading this tafsir ever since our own childhood. But I would like to present here Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi's tafsir here, which he has actually proffered in the light of language and in the light of the laws of the Quran, and which actually presents a very different and in fact a very unique picture. And the purpose is that you can analyze the arguments which he has given, and if these arguments hold weight, if they hold ground, of course, then they should be considered. And if people think that these arguments are not that strong, then of course they can disregard this opinion. But as a principle, we must always look at new opinions on the basis of the arguments which are proffered and not dismiss them merely on the basis that why is this new interpretation being presented, whereas in 14 centuries there's no one else who has presented this. So in our approach, what we need to understand it is not the people who count, but it's exactly the arguments that they put forward which count vis-a-vis the interpretation of the Quran. So Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi, as I said, has presented this tafsir. You can look up his tafsir in his Majmu' Tafsir Farahi, which has been translated into Urdu by his own very famous exegete and student, Ustaz Amin Islahi. His own tafsir is also available in English, and you can have an idea of how Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi has actually approached his tafsir. Ustaz Amin Islahi's summary of his teacher's tafsir and exegesis can be seen from his book, and there are subtle nuances in which he differs, but by and large, the tafsir followed by his teacher is the same as he has himself followed. So just to give you an idea of how Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi has interpreted this surah, I'm just going to present to you a summary of some of the important arguments that he has presented, and then you can weigh these arguments in the scales of reason and revelation. The first and most important thing which Ustaz Farahi has presented is that the law of the Almighty always is that he wants people to first do their work, first do whatever they can, and his help only comes once a person has done all that is needed of him. Even if it is something that he is faced, it is of huge status, of stupendous nature, even then it is essential that he or she should first expend the efforts whatever can be done in this regard. So he has also cited the law of the Almighty and said that the Israelites, when they refused Moses and they said that they will not go to the land of Palestine to fight, and they had actually said, "Fazhab anta wa rabbuka faqatila," that go, you Moses, go and with your Lord and fight them. Inna hahuna qaidun, we are going to stay and stationed here. And it was as a result of this defeatist mentality and attitude that the Almighty actually punished them, and they were made to wander in the desert for 40 years. So this clearly shows that the purpose or the law of the Almighty is that however difficult might the task before us be, but we have to do the best that we can if we have to earn God's help. And this is how he helps. He does not help unless we help ourselves. So it cannot be accepted that Abdul Muttalib actually had consigned the holy shrine to the Almighty without doing his own bit. In fact, what Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi has told us vis-a-vis the whole picture which emerges regarding Surah Fil is that what Abdul Muttalib actually did was that he took refuge in the nearby mountains of Mecca, And from there, he pelted stones, of course, he and his accomplices and all his army, whatever people whoever people there were there, they pelted stones, and then the Almighty's help appeared in the form of a huge storm, and that storm actually gave those stones which were thrown by the people of the Quraysh a tremendous force, and they struck the elephants and the people of Abraha, and they totally destroyed them. So the whole picture which comes forth as a result of his interpretation is that actually Abdul Muttalib thought that facing such a huge army in the open would have been counterproductive. They would have stood no chance. So he took refuge in the mountains and resorted to what we can today call as a guerrilla warfare, and from there he actually threw those stones, and he and the rest of the Quraysh, and that whole affair was actually transformed by the Almighty into a very strong stone hurling wind, and these stones then struck. So this is how Ustaz Farahi has actually presented Surah Fil. So the second argument which he has presented besides the law of God is that the word Rama or Rami, which is actually found in Tarmihim, it does not collocate with the action of the birds. Birds cannot throw, they can only drop. And the word alqa yulqi would have been much more perhaps much more appropriate for their action instead of Rama. Rama means to throw something by force or through a catapult or through the force of the air, and it cannot be ascribed to birds who were carrying stones, allegedly carrying stones in their beaks and in their paws. So this is something which is against linguistics and does raise a lot of questions at how and why did the Almighty use this word in this, if the meaning was the same as has been generally interpreted. Then Ustaz Farahi has also presented couplets from ancient Arabic literature and said that look how people portrayed this incident, and these people were actually poets of those times. And of course, if this incident took place during the birth of the Prophet or the year in which the Prophet was born, then we can clearly see that those people might still have been alive at the time of the Prophet when this incident was being portrayed and reported. So he has quoted many couplets from Arabic literature to support his view, but I'm just going to narrate before you a few of them. So Abu Qais is reported to have said, فَأُرْسِلَ مِنْ رَبِّهِمْ حَاسِبٌ يَلُفُّهُمْ مِثْلَ لَفِّ الْقَزَمِ, which means then a hasib was leashed on them by God or unleashed on them by God, which enwrapped them like rubbish. Hasib in Arabic means a stone hurling wind, a wind which brings a lot of stones and hurls it with great force. And then we have Saifi ibn Amir. He says, فَلَمَّا أَجَازُوا بَطْنَ نُعْمَانَ رَدَّهُمْ جُنُودُ اللَّهِ بَيْنَ صَافٍ وَحَاسِبٍ. So this means that as soon as they advanced beyond the Batn Norman, which is a place of course, the forces of the Almighty alighted among the Hasib and the Saif and destroyed them. Hasib and Saif again refer to the stone hurling winds, which we have just alluded to. So he has also proffered some other parallels which you can look up and see, but the primary purpose here is just to gauge your attention regarding how linguistically and according to the laws of the Quran he has made this interpretation. And then viewers, that he has also pointed out the fact that the invocation or the supplication made by Abdul Muttalib has often been construed to mean that he had consigned the house of God to the Almighty and resigned himself to the mountains and his people as well. And it is generally quoted as if it's a matter of resignation or consignment from Abdul Muttalib. On the other hand, if Ustaz Farahi, the way he has explained this supplication in the form of couplets, then it has a very entirely different ring to it. So the words Allahumma innal mar'i yamna'u rahlahu famna' hilalak la yaghlibanna salibuhum wa mihaluhum abadan mihalak in kunta tarikahum wa qiblatana fa'mur ma badalak. O Lord, a man protects his family, so protect your people. Let not their cross and their strength overpower you. If you want to leave our Qibla at their mercy, then do as you please. So this is how people have generally construed the last couplet of this stanza to mean that basically what was meant was that Abdul Muttalib was leaving the house of God at the mercy of God himself, and was telling him, okay, since it's your house, we leave it to your mercy. Whereas if this whole supplication and invocation is read in its context, it clearly brings out the tremendous trust which Abdul Muttalib had shown while uttering these words. It was not that he was consigning the house of God. It was as if he was actually appealing to the Almighty that this is your house and you're going to protect it. This does not preclude the fact that Abdul Muttalib was saying that I'm not going to do anything, you do all the protection work. Of course, it meant that his trust in God was so much that he said that we are helpless people, it is something which is beyond us, we will try our best, but it is at your mercy that you have to do this, and we leave this to your mercy. So the prayer of Abdul Muttalib, of course, has to be interpreted the way it has been in its context. And then viewers, Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi has also pointed out this fact that all historians are actually unanimous in saying that from wherever the army of Abraha passed, all the tribes which came in their way, they vociferously and vehemently resisted Abraha, and this has been reported in history. And it's also reported that one of the tribesmen of the Banu Saqif actually secretly told the Abraha's commanders where Mecca is. He actually showed them the way. And it is said that when he died, their own tribe used to pelt stones at his grave as a means of disgracing him and humiliating him. So Ustaz Farahi says that if this is what happened with regards to some very small tribes of Arabs, how can this be taken that the Quraysh had actually abandoned the house of God to his own mercy? And then Ustaz Hameed Uddin Farahi has also said that this verse, Arsala alayhim tayran ababil, it has to be interpreted in its proper context as well. Here actually the word tayr it refers to birds, and ababil actually is a collective noun which would actually mean a group of birds. And the word arsala is meant to describe the fact that the Almighty sent these birds to actually devour the corpses of the slain people. And this is how it is generally said that in Arab poetry also, in our own language also, that when birds and especially these such birds as vultures and these meat-eating birds are sent, then the primary purpose is that they actually metaphorically portray that there is an incident of war going on and they're going to feed on the dead bodies. It's not that Arsala alayhim tayran ababil here means that birds were sent with stones in their beaks and in their paws and in their claws. It's the other way. It's actually the fact that the birds were sent not for the purpose of stowing thrones, but for the purpose of eating the dead bodies or the corpses. And there are some other linguistic details as well, which of course you can look up when you study his tafsir, and I would urge you strongly that my purpose here is just to point towards a particular direction so that you can direct yourself to another interpretation and see how it weighs in the scales of reason and revelation. And as far as its interpretation is concerned, it's best if you look it up. It's available both in Urdu and in English. Of course, originally it was written in Arabic, and this is something which is perhaps going to open our eyes as well. So with this advice and with this urging that we must look up the original as well, I now come to an end to this short talk on Ustaz Farahi's interpretation of Surah Fil. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والمسلمات.